If you have bought or sold real estate in California in the last 10 to 15 years, you probably have some form of PTSD, and not the joking kind either. I mean, real stress, real anxiety between high taxes, wild bidding wars, permits that take forever, cities that feel like they're working against you and not with you, and it can be exhausting. So when people from California start looking to buy a home here in Northern Nevada, we hear the same questions over and over. The nervous ones, the paranoid ones, and the ones that make sense if you live through California's chaos. So today I'm going to talk to you about the top 15 questions that California transplants ask us when they're trying to buy a home here in Northern Nevada. We want to walk you through why the answers here are different, and most of them in a good way. And this might be the first time in a long time where buying a home doesn't have to feel like a fight. Of course, as always, we brought Sydney Lessinger on, and we've got a list here of 15 questions. I'm going to let you ask me question number 1. And some of these are pretty funny. They're like legitimate questions that you get over and over and over. Since you're out with a lot of the buyers these days, what is the first question that we get?
This one I get the most frequently. And what's the catch with property taxes being so low?
Property taxes here in comparison to California are definitely much lower. The other thing here is we get the question, is it based on your sales price? Which in California it is. I know there's some other loopholes sometimes where people can bring their taxes with them. But for us here, our taxes, you can have 3 houses that are the exact same price, and an older home's going to have much lower taxes than a brand new home would have. But for the most part, we're roughly around 1%. Older will be a little less. Newer will be right around that. But we are dramatically lower. And I always say, every state is going to get your taxes one way or another. Ours just happen to be a very low, relatively speaking, property tax state. I think we're one of the 10 lowest states for property taxes. And so on our listings, it will show you what the property taxes are. So if you're selling a house there and moving here and you spend $1 million, no, your property taxes are not going to be $10,000 unless you bought some really brand new, high-end, super expensive homes, which then it could happen. But for the most part, yes, they are much lower, and we love to tell them that. All right, so question number 2. We get this one a lot is there really no income tax?
Correct. That is a legitimate, real thing. It's just a different tax structure that we have here. There's a few other states that are pretty similar to us, if not the exact same.
I think there's 9 or 10 states that don't have income tax.
Yep, but we do have sales tax here that might be a little bit higher than some of the states that have income tax. But again, like you had mentioned a minute ago, they're going to get their taxes from you one way or another.
Well, the people that are coming from California, if you've lived there, grown up there, spent your whole life there, the ones that move here then, they just don't know any other way. They're so used to having income tax that when they come here, all of a sudden they don't have it, or they retire here and it's not being pulled out of their retirement incomes. It's just odd to them. They don't understand it. But no, we don't have income tax. We pay some other ones, but for the most part, we're a pretty low tax state.
They also ask me all the time if they need to write love letters to sellers to beg them to basically pick their offer.
So I used to see these a lot in the days of multiple offers. And when I say multiple offers, we're talking 10, 20, 30 offers on a house. Of course, that market is gone. It is not that way anymore. You do see the occasional, we call them love letters. I really do think that eventually these letters are going to be outlawed and banned and deemed illegal because the whole point of them is to try to tell you a little bit more about the family, and it can be construed as discriminatory if you pick one offer over another offer, whether it's a younger couple, an older couple, whatever it might be, people with pets or no pets or whatever it is. So I know some sellers or buyers think they're going to be a benefit to them, and I think in the past maybe they were. I just think it's going to be something that, as we're being much more PC in real estate, it's going to be something that absolutely goes away. So how many offers do I need to write in order to get a house? And I think those were being asked back when it was a little more crazy.
Definitely.
Not so much anymore. Because if you bought your home 15 years ago, you might have had that. And now.
Right. And I know a lot of the time, too, people are still a little bit stuck on that 2020 COVID era of buying property where the real estate market, a lot of places, was pretty dang crazy.
Right.
People were in multiple offer situations. They were fighting tooth and nail, just throwing offers out at houses to try to see if one would stick.
Right. With no inspections and no appraisals and nothing.
Exactly.
Right.
Just basically, here's as much money as possible with the least amount of strings attached, so then they would get into something. And yes, sometimes we do have multiple offer situations.
But nothing like that.
But nothing like that, where you could potentially be competing with 3, 4, 5 other people, but it's one house. You're not necessarily going to go to the next house and have the same exact thing happen to you. We're a little bit more chill.
Well, I think just in general, the whole nation, the last few years, the market has definitely calmed down until you're not seeing that nearly as much anymore. But if you did buy a home 5, 10, 15 years ago, and that was your last experience, it's a legitimate question that we get on a pretty regular basis.
Yes. And this is probably one of, if not the most popular question that I've been asked recently due to some of the fires that have happened in California. But what's the fire insurance situation here? Is it difficult to get?
And we've seen it on a very rare occasion. I do have had a couple of clients, if they are more up towards the mountains, more towards Montreux, more in Washoe Valley, we do have, over the years have had wildfire concerns here. But it's not been this all of a sudden skyrocketing insurance and, all that kind of stuff. And we haven't had too many of an issues, but I think this is going to become more of a topic and more of a question. But as of now, if there's a house in an area that we think might be a little more high risk or high concern, first thing we're going to do is call one of our insurance reps and find out what the deal is. But from some of the stories we're hearing from Californians that are legitimately having their insurance canceled and all that kind of stuff, we haven't experienced that. Not saying it couldn't have happened here to somebody, but it's not something that we're seeing yet on a regular basis. So just know, depending on where the house is, we'll have those conversations, but it's not a big concern like it is in California quite yet.
Right.
For those that are thinking about maybe buying land and maybe building a house, how long will it take to get permits, not just for building a house, but even if you wanted to do remodel work where you needed contractors and those kind of things?
A remodel will definitely be easier to get permitting for. It's less serious. It takes a little bit less of a process to be able to get. So for remodels, you're looking, depending on what you want to do, this will vary, but you're looking at about 3 to 6 months, depending on the size of the project you're doing. And then for home building, that is a completely different beast.
Right.
It will take you probably 6 to 10 months to get your permits just to even start breaking ground, not even to have a foundation, none of that. Building a house is going to take you a while.
And we have a client who's now building his third house, and he has said it's become more of a hassle and more of a pain than he ever remembered it being.
Yeah.
And of course, your brother, he works for a construction company. They build apartment buildings and other stuff like that. And I know it's been hard for them as well. So I still think in today's world, for people that think they're going to buy something cheaper and better, you're almost better off buying something and doing some remodel work if you can find something along those lines. So that's kind of one of the ones that's really the toughest ones. So if you're someone who's thinking about moving here to Northern Nevada, do me a favor. Check out the link in the description below where you can get a copy of our free buyer's guide that will get you started on your journey to Northern Nevada. Homeowners Association. So the question we get a lot of times is, where can I park my car? What color can I paint my house? Are they going to freak out about my landscaping? What kind of crazy questions are you getting about HOAs?
I hear oftentimes that people are asking about just weird little things that don't really seem to happen here very often. Like chickens, for example, sometimes people will ask about having those, or they ask, can I paint my house a certain color? Do I have to have my fence stained like everybody else's? There are certain rules, obviously, that some HOAs will have that they want uniformity within their communities. Like the neighborhood that we live in, we actually have 2 HOAs. We have a kind of land maintenance agreement that goes over the entire kind of South Meadows area. And then we also have one that's basically for your house. Don't paint your house neon orange and crazy purple, and don't park your RV outside for too long.
And again, I tell people, if your HOA fees are under $100, and typically it's basic rules and regulations for things like that about not parking an RV in the street or not painting a crazy color or making sure you do maintain your landscaping.
Yep.
In our area, there's even houses that have a third HOA.
Yep.
So if there's a third HOA, then usually it's gated and it would have amenities like pools and clubhouses and gyms and all that kind of stuff. And if it does, again, for people that have nothing, they want nothing to do with an HOA, we have lots of neighborhoods that don't have HOAs either. So you can't avoid it. Most of them here are not crazy restrictive. There are a few areas like Collin Ranch and a few others that are a little more tight with their rules and regulations. So just have to decide on what you're willing to live with. I know I personally have always liked the under $100 basic rules and regulations so that, nobody's doing anything crazy with leaving cars on blocks in front of your house and those kind of things. So
the next one that I get a lot is, can you really build a guest house or ADU without having to fight the city for like 18 months? Some of these people have been fighting this for a very long time.
Here, it goes back to the permitting and what people want to build. I've had a lot of people build detached garages versus an actual ADU that they want to do for rental space, versus we get out in the Red Rock area, we sell lots of horse property, and people are building barns and corrals and sheds. And most of the time, that stuff, depending on what it is, like with sheds, it's usually relatively small. You don't even need permitting for that. But when you start to get bigger projects, most people, once they submit, it doesn't take overly long for them to do them. And again, a lot of it depends on if you're in or out of an HOA. Right. And if you're in an HOA, there might be more rules of what it has to look like, versus if you're out in an area that doesn't have them, then you can pretty much kind of do whatever you want to some sort of level. So this leads us right back into what we were just talking about. These 3 questions, the 2 that we just asked, and this one, they all kind of go together. And it says, is it illegal to have chickens or sheds or gardens or ADUs and those kind of things? It is not, but there are certain areas and neighborhoods that they're not really agreed upon.
Definitely. And I actually know a lot of people that in certain HOAs that are kind of more lenient or a little bit more relaxed, that have chickens like right in the middle of town, just in their backyard. You don't necessarily have to live on property to have animals like that on your property. You just have to make sure that your HOA allows for it.
You might not want a rooster.
Right.
Rooster, neighbors might get pissed.
Yes.
But everyone likes a neighbor with chickens because you might get free eggs from your neighbor.
Yes.
And I know when I'm at my girlfriend's house, we get eggs all the time. They have chicken. One of her friends has chickens. We get great local eggs. It's awesome as far as that stuff goes.
And another one that we get is, what is the fine for using too much water during a drought?
And this is one of the funny, because we do get water questions quite a bit. And we are the driest of all 50 states. But in my 36, 7 years now of living here, there was only like a summer or two where you have like specific watering days and not overwatering because they were concerns about the drought. That's why every winter people pay attention to how much snow and rain and stuff we get up in the mountains. But for the most part, I don't have a client or anyone that I know that's gotten fined for overwatering or overuse of water. And our water's not overly expensive here either. I think a lot of people are really good about trying to put in landscape and maintenance and things where we're not using a lot of water. But believe it or not, for a dry state like ours, the water, I think it's more of a conversation that is an actual thing that happens. Right. So the water thing is not nearly the concern I think that people think of. Which leads us right into question number 11 is, will the city fine me if my grass dies?
I have actually, I love this question. I've had 2 people ask me this. And the answer is no, I don't think that the city will do that. The only time that would start to happen is if your property started to get distressed, the whole property. You're not going to get fined, however, if your grass burns.
You might get a letter from an HOA.
Potentially your HOA, yes.
But typically if you see dead grass, it's usually a foreclosure house or something bad happened and the house has just been left for dead. But if you drive around Reno, you will not see a whole lot of houses where you got brown dead grass to begin with. But it is funny the questions that people ask. If I rent out, am I going to get sued or fined by the city? Meaning, like so you and I live in a house.
Yep.
If we, for whatever reason, we're going to be gone for 6 months and just rent it out temporarily or did the whole Airbnb thing or just turned into a rental to begin with, are you going to get in any sort of trouble?
No, not necessarily. There are certain places that you potentially could be in Reno that, like a condo complex, for example, that would not allow a short-term rental whatsoever.
Right.
That could potentially happen, but I don't know a lot of people in our area that do the kind of Airbnb, Verbo kind of a thing. You see them up at Lake Tahoe, but I don't necessarily think you're going to get in trouble. But your HOA might have an issue with it, and then you could potentially have a property management company, but I don't necessarily think you're going to have a problem.
I tell people, if you're thinking about doing that short-term rental, you're better off buying a house not in an HOA.
Right.
Then you don't have any worries with that. My friend Chris, who I've known since we were in 3rd grade, came up here because his daughter's going to go to college here. They did a Verbo or Airbnb, and it was in like an old Southwest area. And I know they're around, but those are things where most property managers can't manage them. Short-term rentals is a whole different animal as far as that goes, where again, if people are buying property here as just straight rentals, the next question we get all the time is, are there rent caps or eviction bans like you see in California? Which this is a much more legitimate question. I get a lot of people getting all their rental property out of California.
Right.
And I know you don't do property management. I have a property management permit and license to do it, and our property manager, Kylie, handles that stuff for us. And I tell people all the time, we are a landlord-friendly state.
Yes.
The landlord has, rules. The tenants have rules. They're easy to follow. And there really isn't a whole lot of eviction bans or rent controls. Right. It's all those kind of things. So if you're thinking about getting your rental property money out of California, it's something you should do here. I know you don't deal with that one a whole lot, that's why I kind of took this one. But when you talk to Kylie, anything, we haven't seen anything crazy with that. You get a lot of questions though?
Yeah, sometimes. I have people who will look for rental properties, and there is a difference though between, are you going to live in this property at some point, or are you simply just an investment property, simply just to rent it out?
Yeah.
That's more, I get the direction for the house portion of it, but not necessarily rent.
Right. And we get the occasional person, which we just dealt with one yesterday, where they want to buy a house here, have it rented for a few years, and then eventually move here. So they're buying it to live in it eventually. But in the short term, it's going to be a rental. So there's always those different kind of things. Question number 14.
Yes. So can my neighbor sue me if my tree leans onto the fence? This has been asked a couple of times. Again, crazy questions that I never would have thought would have ever happened. But apparently in California, you potentially could get sued for this.
So if someone, especially in older neighborhoods where you start to see really big, tall trees, if my tree's in my yard, but half my tree's hanging over the fence, this is the question they're asking is, can I get sued?
Potentially.
Sued if like it fell into their house or...
Yeah.
Interesting. I know this happened to your brother. The neighbor's tree at my son, your brother's house, literally fell into his backyard.
Almost hit his house.
Luckily, didn't hit anything. Shockingly, hit nothing. We just had some minor fence repairs and hit nothing. It would be interesting to see. I don't necessarily know he would have sued him, but I would imagine the neighbor's homeowner's insurance probably would have had to deal with it rather than a lawsuit. But luckily, it didn't hit the house. It was crazy. I just remember walking out. I found the tree with him. And it was laying there in the backyard. So it was just crazy. Again, weird questions that people ask. And question number 15 is, are people going to hate me? This is kind of our funny one. Are people going to hate me if they find out I'm a transplant and I just moved here from California?
Every single Californian I have spoken to in my real estate career has asked me this question.
And why do they think that Nevadans are going to hate them?
There's a stigma behind it that people are worried that because they're coming from California, whatever it may be for, you're coming to Reno because you're just tired of living in California, that we're not going to like it, that we're not going to like them, that they're going to change everything about Reno, that all of a sudden that they're going to Californify everything. And it really isn't the case, because a lot of the time once they get a chance to spend a little bit of time in Reno, they've said that we're all really welcoming and they've had great positive experiences.
But it was a question, a concern they had.
Oh, yeah.
I tell them all the time, there's things here that the reason you left California, leave those there. So if they want to come here and then make us California, that's where the Nevada people get upset. But if you're concerned about it, what do we tell them to do with their cars?
Get your Nevada plates.
Nevada plates on there as soon as possible.
Yep.
and go from there. And it's funny because many of the people that are Nevadans, quote unquote, that will complain about this are really just Californians that happen to come here 10 or 20 or 30 years before you did. It's amazing how many people are like, oh, I've lived in Nevada 40 years. But where are you from? San Jose, San Francisco, Sacramento. So it's kind of funny how, just because they got here first, they think, well, last one in, shut the door behind, don't let anyone else come here kind of thing. So anything you can think off the top of your head, crazy questions that we're getting?
No, not at the moment.
All right. So if you have any of your own crazy questions that you want to ask us, by all means, reach out to us. Let us know. We'd love to hear them. We'd love to answer them. And this is kind of the list that we get on. And again, if you're not coming here from California, you probably have half these questions you're going to ask as well. So there you go. If you're someone who's thinking about moving here to Northern Nevada, do me a favor. Check out this video we did right here about how California is reshaping Northern Nevada.